Welcome to EnglishPass Podcast, brought to you from our local studio in Calgary. I'm your host, Samantha, and today we're diving into an exciting topic: training a new employee. Whether you're a beginner or intermediate learner, in this podcast, we're helping you level up your English listening and reading skills. And before we get started, let me tell you that the sponsor of this episode is TypeFit, keyboard typing practice and learning service. Today, we're exploring something really interesting: training a new employee. This is an engaging subject for English learners because it covers a lot of practical vocabulary and real-world situations. So, let's dive right in. Training a new employee is the systematic process of teaching a person the specific skills, knowledge, and behaviors they need to perform their job effectively within a company. It is much more than just showing someone where the coffee machine is or explaining their daily tasks. It is about helping them understand the heart of the organization and how they fit into its goals. While many people use the word training to mean a single afternoon of instruction, in the professional world, it is often a long-term journey called onboarding. Onboarding refers to the entire process of integrating a new hire into the company culture and providing them with the resources they need to succeed over several months. This is different from a simple orientation, which is usually just the first day where an employee fills out paperwork, gets their ID badge, and learns the office rules. If orientation is the introduction to the book, onboarding and training are the actual chapters that tell the story of the job. Why is this process so important for a business? Imagine a company that hires a very talented person but gives them no guidance. They would likely feel lost, frustrated, and eventually quit. This leads us to the concept of retention, which is the ability of a company to keep its employees for a long time. Good training increases retention because it makes people feel confident and valued from their very first day. Historically, the way we train people has changed significantly. In the Middle Ages, for example, the primary method was the apprenticeship. A young person would live with a master craftsman for many years to learn a trade like blacksmithing or carpentry. Today, we use more modern methods like digital modules, but the core idea remains the same: passing knowledge from someone who knows to someone who needs to learn. Let us look at a real-world example of training in a fast-paced environment, such as a local cafe. When a new barista is hired, they do not just start making lattes for customers immediately. Instead, they often begin with shadowing. Shadowing is a training method where the new employee follows an experienced worker around to watch exactly how they perform their duties. The new barista might spend 3 days just watching how to grind the beans, how to steam the milk to the perfect temperature, and how to use the complex cash register system. This allows the new person to see the rhythm of the work without the pressure of making a mistake in front of a customer. Have you ever noticed how some workers seem to move perfectly in sync with their environment? That is usually the result of careful shadowing and practice. Another example can be found in the world of technology. When a software engineer joins a new company, they might already know how to write code, but they do not know the specific code base of that company. A code base is the collection of all the digital instructions that make a particular software work. To train this engineer, the company might assign them a mentor. Mentorship is a relationship where a more experienced person provides guidance and support to a less experienced person. The mentor might walk the new hire through the software's architecture and explain why certain decisions were made in the past. This prevents the new hire from making rookie mistakes that could crash the entire system. Without this specific training, even the most brilliant programmer would struggle to be productive in a new environment. It is a common misconception that training is only about hard skills. Hard skills are the technical abilities someone needs, like knowing how to use a forklift or how to use accounting software. However, effective training must also focus on soft skills. Soft skills are personal attributes that enable someone to interact effectively and harmoniously with other people, such as communication, empathy, and time management. For instance, consider a new salesperson at a car dealership. They must learn the hard skills of understanding engine specifications and financing options. But they also need training on how to read a customer's body language and how to speak persuasively without being pushy. If the dealership only trains them on the mechanical parts of the car, the salesperson will likely fail because they cannot connect with the human beings buying the cars. In a healthcare setting, training can literally be a matter of life and death. When a new nurse starts at a large hospital, they must go through rigorous training on the hospital's specific electronic health record system. They might spend a whole week in a classroom setting before they ever touch a patient. They practice inputting data, checking for medication errors, and communicating with the pharmacy. They also engage in role-playing exercises. Role-playing is a training technique where employees act out scenarios they might face in the real world. A trainer might pretend to be an angry or confused patient, and the new nurse must practice how to remain calm and professional while still providing the correct medical care. This builds muscle memory, a type of mental habit that allows the employee to react correctly under stress. Culturally, the way training is handled can vary across the globe. In some cultures, training is very direct and top-down, where the boss gives clear instructions and the employee follows them perfectly. In other cultures, training is more collaborative, and new employees are encouraged to ask questions and suggest better ways of doing things from the very beginning. Neither way is necessarily better, but it is important for a new hire to understand the cultural expectations of their specific workplace. For example, in many Japanese companies, there is a concept called senpai and kohai, which describes the relationship between a senior and a junior. The senior has a deep social responsibility to train and look after the junior, not just in work tasks, but also in how to behave as a member of the professional community. What happens if a company ignores training? This usually leads to a very steep learning curve. The learning curve is a term used to describe the rate of a person's progress in gaining a new skill or experience. If there is no training, the curve is very steep, meaning it takes much longer for the employee to become useful to the company. This costs the company money because they are paying a full salary to someone who is only doing 20% of the work. For example, a new worker in a clothing warehouse might spend hours searching for the right boxes because no one explained the filing system to them. If they had received 1 hour of training, they could have been working at full speed by lunch. Let's look at a fifth example: a customer service representative for an airline. Their training is incredibly complex because they have to handle thousands of different flight rules and angry customers. Their training often involves a trial period or a probationary period. This is a set amount of time, usually 3 to 6 months, where the new employee is still learning and their performance is being closely monitored. During this time, they might handle calls while a supervisor listens in on a second headset. This provides a safety net. If the new employee gives the wrong information, the supervisor can step in and correct it before the customer gets upset. This allows the employee to learn by doing, but without the risk of causing a major problem for the company. A sixth example can be seen in the construction industry. Before a new worker can even step onto a job site, they must undergo safety training. This is not about how to build a wall, but how to stay alive. They learn about OSHA regulations in the United States, which are federal rules for workplace safety. They learn how to wear a harness, how to spot electrical hazards, and how to communicate in a noisy environment. This training often includes a physical test where they must demonstrate they can use the equipment properly. This highlights that training is not always just talking or reading. Sometimes it is a physical demonstration of competence. It is also interesting to note that training never truly ends. Modern companies are moving toward a culture of continuous learning. This is the idea that even an employee who has been at a company for 10 years still needs training because the world is always changing. New technology, new laws, and new customer preferences mean that everyone is constantly a little bit of a new employee. However, the initial training for a fresh hire remains the most critical because it sets the tone for their entire career at the company. If the training is disorganized and confusing, the employee will feel that the company is disorganized and confusing. If the training is structured, welcoming, and thorough, the employee will feel that they have joined a professional team that cares about their success. To summarize the journey of a new hire, it begins with the basics of orientation and moves into the deeper waters of onboarding. Through methods like shadowing, mentorship, and role-playing, the employee gains both hard and soft skills. They move past the initial challenges of the learning curve and eventually become a productive member of the team. Throughout this entire process, the goal is always the same: to turn a stranger into a specialist who feels at home in their new role. And that is the true art of training. And that's all for today's episode of EnglishPass Podcast. I hope you found this helpful. Remember to practice what you've learned, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how we improve. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and join us next time. Let me remind you that the sponsor of the episode is TypeFit, and I suggest to check the link at the description. I'm Samantha, and I'm excited to be your host for many more fascinating episodes to come. Until then, keep learning and keep growing. Goodbye.